This drawing was actually begun in the year 2013, as in the study for it. And I pulled the study out and I finished it yesterday. Well, actually, I finished it 2 days ago. And now what I'm doing is I'm formalizing the study into what we can call a shareable work of art that can be shared with the world in a variety of formats. As a print, as a card, and who knows just what else. But what we have here is 11 magic squares that are intended to captivate the imagination of witnesses and have them saying, I'm inspired. All right.
Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, wherever you are in the world, and welcome. Welcome to the infinite way where spirituality meets humanity. And it brings me great pleasure to introduce to you Mr. Vandorn Hinnant. And just to give you a little bit about Vandorn, he was born in Greensboro, North Carolina, and received a Bachelor's of Arts degree in art design from North Carolina A&T State University in Greensboro, North Carolina in 1981, and briefly studied sculpture at UNC Greensboro. He is a recipient of a 1993-1994 North Carolina Arts Council Artist Fellowship Award and has participated in residencies at the Cambridge Center for the Arts and Sciences, Project Row Houses, Row 10, Penland School of Crafts, Center for Design Innovation, Winston-Salem, North Carolina, the National Arts Education Association, and the Brandywine Workshop in Philadelphia, PA. The artist has a long history of public exhibition. He sees his purpose as a creative to serve as an inspiration to others wishing to live fully engaged with the creative response. But I'm going to tell you a little something else. Mr. Vandorn is a geometer. He is a person that loves and embraces sacred geometry. He is a person that has the depth of what? Understanding how to reach that which is within. I'm so excited to have Mr. Vandorn here. Thank you. Welcome.
Well, now, I'm delighted to be here, and thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. Well, everyone, it looks like we're getting ready to embark on an interesting and curious voyage today. So I would say let's rock and roll.
Absolutely. And as we unveil what it is that we're going to share, I want our audience to know a little bit more about your introduction to mathematics in your life and how mathematics plays a role within for you.
My experience of mathematics began as the most traumatic phenomenon because I was being educated by a system or in a system where mathematics was not user friendly for people like myself because it has to be a tactile experience where a hands-on experience. And so when I was introduced to what we conveniently call sacred geometry in the year 1989, my mentor, having been a physicist and having quite the facility with mathematics, he was able to assist people like myself, learners like myself, to appreciate mathematics from the vantage point of a hands-on experience. And so what we were doing is we were constructing in a two-dimensional plane a frame of reference for the exploration of number, not just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 ad infinitum, but the square root of 1, the square root of 2, the square root of 4, the square root of 5 ad infinitum. So what I began to comprehend was mathematics by way of Euclidean geometry. And that is what this conversation really wants to be about, which is we have an opportunity as a species to have an elevation in our thinking about number. What does it mean? The irrational numbers are no longer irrational because now they are computable in a two-dimensional plane. Now, if you tell a person who is married to Western mathematics, they will say, go away, you're making noise. The unfortunate thing is that they have no experience. If they gave themselves an opportunity to have a hands-on experience, they would experience the same revelation that is available to all of those who become sincere students of the geometry. I'm going to use the geometry of life, the geometry of art and life. Those are alternate terms for the term sacred geometry, even alternate terms for the term Euclidean geometry. So, yes, please.
Yes, and you know what? I would be remiss if I didn't let our audience know that you are the co-author or author of The Rest of Euclid, your book. So to understand the depths of what we're about to embark on, they need to understand that that is something that can be procured and that you have contributed to and brought forward. So I just wanted to interject that.
Yes, the full title, we will give the full title now. The Rest of Euclid, an ancient architecture of mathematics and a modern theory of number. I believe that's the full title. Anyways, it's a long subtitle. The short of it is, when you go look up on Amazon, The Rest of Euclid, or Barnes and Noble, The Rest of Euclid, you will find the book. I am one of the three authors because I came into the equation in 1989, and we just jumped in and started sharing what we knew. Now, what I knew all came from the realm of the intuition. So I would be remiss if I did not mention the name Ramanujan. Ramanujan
Okay.
came from India, and if you can fill in some of the gaps for me, Ramanujan was invited to Cambridge to participate in some learning, and he would answer questions without going through the due process of proofs. He could actually answer a question to a very complex mathematical equation, if I may. And when he was asked, "How did you do this?" he says, "The goddess gave me the answer." That was one of his answers. And so that goddess that he's referring to, I would call it higher self. And higher self is always speaking through the pedestrian awareness, guiding and governing it when the pedestrian awareness is able to and willing to submit its will, if I may, to that higher dimensional frequency called higher self, or some people say God, if I may. So what we're doing is we're, people like myself and Ramanujan and many others, we let the intuition speak, and we simply say what wants to be stated through intuition to the edification of humankind. And it really is that simple. It's no more complex than that.
So, as we embark on looking at some of the key things, you and I had a discussion earlier that when we were trying to decide where we wanted to go with this, and I want to bring up the golden ratio. And I want to talk a little bit about the golden ratio and your exploration of the golden ratio as it pertains to the five triangles, your exploration of the golden ratio as it pertains to the isosceles triangles, and some of the conclusions that you've come to.
All right. Well, it's funny that you would say that. Now, of all of the images that I pulled out, I neglected to pull that particular one out. One that actually is a visual representation of this phenomenon, the golden proportion. So we have a number of techniques. When I say we as a species, we have a number of techniques. I'm attempting to open the folder. I can't even open it. Okay, so we have a number of techniques that makes it possible to see a physical example of the golden ratio. So I'll just have to talk us through this. The
That's
pentagon.
okay.
Yes, the pentagon. Everybody knows what a pentagon is. It's a five-sided regular polygon. And then the
Right.
five-pointed star that's on the American flag, that five-pointed star is a pentagram. Now, we have these ancient mystical traditions that are the left hand and the right hand of mysticism. And I use those terms poetically and metaphorically. So the right hand path would be people who claim that they're about service to humankind. And the left hand path would be those who consider themselves service to self. So those who are on the right-hand path, the mystical path, who use the pentagram and use the pentagon, we use it for a particular purpose, and that is to help unpack into the pedestrian awareness an appreciation for and a mental comprehension of the sacred number in nature. So there is no place in nature where the golden ratio does not exist. There's this beautiful book that was written by an Italian architect. His name is Giorgi Dozzi, D-O-C-Z-I. The name of the book is titled The Power of Limits. And so what is implied in that is that there are limitations that built-in limitations in nature that govern and guide growth, the phenomenon of growth, right? So everything that is in a growth modality is governed and guided by built-in limitations, if I may. So you don't, in other words, so like a cancer cell is a situation where chaos reigns supreme, when a healthy cell is actually responding to the I'll use the word, the command to be well, if I may. I can't help but speak poetically because I am a poet. I'm like a full-time poet.
That makes perfectly good sense. Yeah, it makes perfectly good sense, because when you look at what grows, and we know that we're in the fractalization of nature, well, what stops it from continuing that fractalization? So a flower becomes a flower and it's in full bloom, and then its limit stops the fractalization so that it is in full bloom. That makes perfectly good sense. A tree gets to a certain height, but I mean, it doesn't grow beyond space and time because it has a limit as to how it's going to grow. So that makes perfectly good sense.
Yes. And so what happens is, what we are talking about are things that belong in everybody's syllabus who's attempting to learn. And so what is, I don't want to speak about what I call the negators of life, okay? We don't want to give them credit for existing, but momentarily, I want to say that there are so many roadblocks and stumbling blocks that want to be removed from the equation, called life, the universe, and everything. In terms of our educational system, we need to embrace something that is liberating. So may I do a screen share, please?
Absolutely. Please do.
I think that's, now is the full image there?
Yes, it is.
Okay, good. So what happens is, this is an example of what belongs in any syllabus. These 4 circles in this very specific relationship to one another. In Euclid, book 1, proposition 1, one is asked to, and I have to say I'm paraphrasing this, one is asked to define a triangle, I think maybe given 2 points or 3 points. I'm not sure. I apologize. I've forgotten what Euclid's proposition 1 first theorem is. But what didn't get emphasized was the fact that as soon as you establish wait a minute, let's begin with the simple truth. And this is very deep. This is really important. Absolutely central to anyone's education. Lines have no meaning without circles in relationship to one another. Okay, so this diagram here, where you have these 4 circles, we have a little A at the center of one circle, a B at the center of another one, C at the center of another one, and D at the center of the other one. Those circles, let's just say we start with the A circle. In order to create these 4 circles, you would have to have 2 points on a plane, the A point and the B point. And if you put your compass point at the A point and put your pencil or your marking instrument at B, you draw your first circle. Then you can go over to the B point and then draw a circle whose circumference goes through the A point in the center of the A circle. Then you have 2 crossings, a crossing at the top, which is where your C point would be. You draw that circle, that would be your 3rd circle, And then at the bottom, you have that point that we call D, which makes it possible to draw a circle centered there, sharing the radius with the B circle, sharing the radius with the A circle. The C circle above shares a radius with the A circle and shares a radius with the B circle. That wants to be in everyone's learning. No child, no human that's being educated, and I don't like to use the word should, but this needs to be part of the education. This was taken out for purposes that we don't want to talk about and think about, taken out of curriculums that have existed in the past for various reasons. This is all about relationship. And what's really important about this is that all four of these circles share a radius. That means that all four of these circles are the same size, which also means that they are each an expression of equal. Okay, so the background that you see behind me, this backdrop is called an abacus for learning. And some people say abacus, but I have a friend that corrected me and it's called an abacus. So what does that mean? An abacus or an abacus for learning simply means that this is an instrument that is used for counting and for calculating. So given this plane of circles that have the same relationship to each neighbor, this makes it possible to draw line segments that are not just increments of one, but also increments of, or let's just say distances that we will call the square root of 1, the square root of 2, the square root of 3, the square root of 4, the square root of 5 ad infinitum. And this is the new mathematics that is being introduced by way of the rest of Euclid. This is the mathematics that promises to assist us with getting beyond self-limiting concepts. Everything that I approach has a metaphysical implication or spiritual implication. So
Right.
I'm actually talking metaphysics and spirituality here when I'm talking about the notion of equal. So each one of these circles can be said to represent an individual. So however many individuals you have, they're all equal to one another. There is no superior and subordinate in the equation. We're all equals. If we hold ourselves equals, it's like doing to others as you would have them doing to you, in my estimation. So this diagram actually wants to speak to that notion of doing to others as you would have them doing to you. I did a beautiful workshop one year for an artist who came down from DC to Winston-Salem to do a community project with a number of kids or youth who grew up in what we would conveniently call the projects, a depressed neighborhood, an intellectually, spiritually depressed neighborhood. So they have been conditioned to be engaged with infighting, right? You always, whoever you see is your enemy, that kind of thing. So
Right.
I brought in this technology that we're looking at right here, and I actually had a string with two pencils, one pencil at each end, and these large pieces of paper. So I gave each child an opportunity to hold the center while the other one drew the circle. So imagine you have two kids, and one is holding the center by way of this pencil on a piece of paper, and the other child draws a circle around that center. And then you let another child step up, so the person who was drawing the circle becomes the person who holds the center for the third child to come in and draw the second circle. And you repeat that, and you get 7 circles, and then you have the seed of life. So we're talking about high magic in an educational environment where people are immediately drawn to the notion of I am another yourself. So if it gets any deeper than that, I want to buy some stock in it. Okay. Uh, so anyway, I'm just speaking extemporaneously, but what we have before us is an opportunity to have a phenomenal upgrade in the conversation. What does it mean to be a human? By way of this thing that we're conveniently calling mathematics, sacred mathematics, sacred geometry. So all of those terms apply. All of it's related to Euclidean geometry. So the rest of Euclid, the title was chosen to help Westerners, for the most part, see beyond the limitations that they had been living with, the limitations of their education. So it was Carter G. Woodson who published The Miseducation of the Negro. What the rest of Euclid represents is an opportunity to re-educate all that have been miseducated in regards to this notion of what is a number and what does it mean for the square root of 1, the square root of 2, the square root of 3, the square root of 4, the square root of 5 ad infinitum to be computable in a two-dimensional plane. And so this is very succinct, but I don't know what to say other than this is what we're asking humankind to reach for, to reach for, to open one's heart and one's mind to the possibility of being educated in a way that humans haven't been educated before. Now, I'd like to pull up this particular piece called "A Light from Circle Island," and let's see how to do this. Can you see that now?
Yes, I can.
Okay, wonderful. So that's on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now "A Light from Circle Island" is for those who know anything about what we conveniently call sacred geometry. And thank you, Drimbalo Melchizedek, for publishing two excellent books, and then called "The Flower of Life," Volume 1 and Volume 2. And those were published several decades ago. And then we have Robert Lawler, who comes along and publishes a book called "Sacred Geometry." So between the two of those good people, we have a tremendous amount of data that is available to anybody that's looking for it. This drawing, titled "A Light from Circle Island," and that's poetry, it happens to be 7 flower of life patterns together. So where you would have a seed of life, you have a flower of life pattern there. And so when we take away the 2 outer perimeter circles of the flower of life, and we just keep adding circles ad infinitum, you have what I call the abacus for learning. This composition happens to be a number computer. Every one of those line segments has a name. Some of the line segments are the square root of 9. Some of the line segments are the square root of 11. And those numbers can be factored. And this is what I mean by they are computable. So we have to take them off of the list of irrational numbers and put them on a list of numbers that become rational only by way of this particular technology, this particular understanding. So now we're talking about something that some of our people make reference to. Now we're talking about having an overstanding and having an understanding. And when you reach that place, then you have something to talk about. Yes.
Right.
Yes. Well,
so with that, I love the fact that in this pattern, I see like this the 4 major circles in its wideness, and then a little bit smaller, and then a little bit smaller, but all interfitting with each one, and all always crossing over the radius of an intersecting plane, right?
Let me speak to that. This is actually a fractal diagram, and let me see how many iterations. Give me 1,
2, 3.
It's probably a 3 iteration fractal. So there are, and what gets to be interesting is it's sort of unfair to talk about this, because what is missing are, let's see, there is 1 circle that's missing that would make it a legitimate fractal pattern, and there are 2 circles that are missing that would make this a perfectly legitimate 3 iteration fractal. And so I never went back. The original belongs to someone out in California, so I can't get my hands on the original to add those 2 circles. But there are 2 circles here that actually would make it possible to legitimately call this a 3 iteration fractal. But minus those 2 key circles, this still hints at and is suggestive of a 3 iteration fractal. And so we have to not say any more about that fractal phenomenon simply because of these 2 circles that are missing. But you see the outer circle that's in blue?
Yes.
Well, that outer circle completely encloses all of these other circles. Well, there are smaller circles that want to be drawn. There's actually a smaller blue circle. The smaller blue circle that you see inside of that blue circle is very, very faint, but it encloses the outer perimeters of 6 larger circles that are on the inside of this complex.
Exactly.
And
Yes.
so, what I guess what I'm attempting to get at is that we have a few circles that would do the same thing when we go to smaller clusters of circles that are the same radius. And once again, maybe one day, thanks to this conversation, maybe one day I will actually do this drawing. And that's fascinating. What I have to tell you is this: intuition had me wanting to slow down and grab a drawing that I did back in 1999 or 1994 when I was at the Penland School of Crafts. I was doing a residency there. I had a two-week residency, artist residency, and they had postcards, and so I sent my mentor a postcard. And what I did is I created this fractal pattern, this absolutely exquisite fractal pattern that's alluded to in this composition. But what I'm talking about right now is a drawing that was created in the year 1994 at Penland School of Crafts that I ended up sending to my mentor. And hold on for a second. Just give me one moment. Oh, man. This is where it gets to be interesting, curious, fascinating. That particular drawing happens to be right here in my hand. So let's see now. This diagram is the diagram that I will be sending you, and you can just insert it. And this is the diagram that we're talking about. Okay, beautiful. Okay, excellent. All right. Okay. Well, so if we talk about number and number theory, how do I, can you see, does this one come up? This drawing?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. This is a Bob Powell Sr. drawing where he is looking at mapping the square root numbers, the square root of 3. If you go to the center, does my cursor show up on this? My cursor?
Yes, it does.
Okay, so I'm circling my cursor around the symbol for the square root of 3, and then the next one is the square root of 4. Then the next one is the square root of 7. The next one is the square root of 9. The next one is the square root of 12. The next one is the square root of 13. Then the square root of 16. The square root of 25. The square root of 27. The square root of, I think, 32. The next one is the square root of 36. And then we have one out that says the square root of 48 and something else, maybe 49. Anyway, this is related to a drawing that we call Jacob's Ladder. And this drawing, I found this drawing in the archives, okay? Long after Bob Powell Sr. had left us. He left in 2015. He passed the summer of 2015. This was in the archives. This drawing is related to my composition titled A Light from Circle Island. And it has an alternate title, which is the HP, and the HP stands for Hinnant Powell, not Hewlett Packard. The HP, Nature's Numbers Supercomputer. That's the alternate title. That's the alternate title for the composition titled A Light from Circle Island. And this drawing is directly related to that drawing that I just spoke of. They basically are one and the same. So what you see all of these unit circles in black that are the same radius. The whole picture plane wants to be populated with those circles. And that would be the equivalent of an abacus for learning. So what Bob had mapped out, and I don't even have a date on this. What's interesting is that he generally dated his drawings, but he didn't date this one, so we don't have a date for it. So it could have been done any year. It could have been done in the 80s, the 90s, possibly even in the 70s. But this is the new number theory that begs to be delivered to the world so that we can start making sense of a different type of mathematics that has been hidden from us for centuries. Okay. And I say a different type of mathematics. We're talking about.
So
Uh,
can you
go ahead, please.
deep can you deep dive into that mathematics, because people need to understand how this relates to what we know about metaphysics and what we know in how we operate today and how it would actually change it.
Okay. I've alluded to this perhaps metaphorically and perhaps poetically. Uh, when we look at the flower of life, let's let's talk about my gratitude to Brother Terrence Howard right now. Okay.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
All I could do is jump in joy every time I would see Terrence talking about the flower of life. He talks about unpacking. He uses that term.
Yeah.
I use the same term. We are both unpacking a suitcase that has to do with the phenomenon of relationship. Okay. When we become spiritually intelligent, there's no question about I am another yourself. That's a given. The flower of life, with each one of these circles sharing a radius, is a way of visually depicting I am another yourself. I am your neighbor. I am your equal.
Yeah.
All of that is built
Yes.
into the equation. So what I'm getting at is that a picture is worth 1,000 words or more. And so with Terrence presenting the pattern known as the flower of life, that image is a teaching tool. That image is a teaching in and of itself. We don't need words. What I'm getting at is that that serves as subliminal seduction, where the pedestrian awareness is being seduced into a sense of identification with a higher ideal. That higher ideal is we are mirrors of one another. We exist
Right.
in we exist in the totality of being as equals. Okay? So it doesn't get any deeper than that. What we have is a
Right.
split. We have a condition that's called the split mind, where I'm over here and you're over there. That is uh, true and false at the same time. Yes, I am over here, and yes, you are over there. But there's a deeper comprehension of being, which says, I am another yourself. And so, whoever you are, whatever you're experiencing, whether you are experiencing joy or sorrow, that also belongs to me. It isn't that I have to swim in the sorrow, and it isn't that I have to swim in the joy. But we do not exist in a vacuum. That means more than those words. We exist in this totality, this wholeness. Uh, we can call it humankind if you want to. So, where our humanity gets to be massaged, if I may, is by identifying with these beautiful patterns that represent sacred relationship. And I'll even use a curious word, right relationship. Okay. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm not sure if that answers your question, but I'm attempting to speak to your question. Yes.
No, it does answer my question, and I want to relate it back to the symbolism of what this really means, because this was the first symbol found in archaeology, represented, in Egypt and in many different places across the world. Okay. And so this symbolism, this right relationship that you're speaking about, this equality that you're speaking about, has been here since the beginning of time. And I really wanted to drive that home so that people have clarity of understand that what we're talking about here isn't just something that's discovered, isn't just something that we're figuring out now. It has always been there, and that's why we're unpacking it.
Yes.
Versus, Oh yeah, it's a fly by night symbol, and by the way, it's fun to draw and anything else. This is an original symbol.
Yes, but this symbol we not. I don't know if any of us can actually say when this pattern was first introduced to the human condition. Okay,
Mhm.
we have
Yeah,
we have we have histories buried under histories buried under histories
on the
as a
histories. Yeah,
collective on this planet. Histories that are alluded to by a great many people. We have Eric von Daniken, and we have Rupert Sheldrake. I mean, there's
Stitchin,
so
and
many,
we have, yes,
yeah,
we have lots and lots.
lots of people that are attempting to show us that there's evidence that goes beyond these most recent contrived notions about history. Like, take Egypt, for example. So many people have been shown how what we will call Egyptian authorities say, no, you can't share that, and no, you can't share that. So there's a lot of no, you can't share this, and no, you can't share that. Well, the time for being worried about misuse of knowledge needs to be put aside. Uh, but
Right,
I will refer to the Wakanda movies for a reason. That council that was held where the queen and her daughter went to this I'll just say outer world council, and she basically told them, you all are not ready for this, um, you know,
right,
so you might as well, you might as well forget us giving you access because you're not ready. Now, we could say that there's still some truth to that notion that there are some people who are simply not ready for this evolutionary jump into what we could also call a deeper dive into number theory. But
right.
I'm doing my best not to think about those people because my job is to bring something to the forefront that can help those who are ready to serve humankind,
Right,
um,
right.
help to prepare them. Okay, so this is preparatory work. This is sort of like setting the dining table for a feast, that a banquet, if I may. And so that's what the rest of Euclid is. It's basically uh, setting the table for a banquet. Yeah. Pardon me, I can't seem to not speak poetically and metaphorically.
Really
Let,
fun.
now, this image, now, does this image show up now?
Yes,
Does
it
it?
does.
Okay, so this image is an installation that I created in 2020, 2013. It was first shown at Diggs Gallery at Winston-Salem State University. I had an exhibition that ran, I think, 6 or 7 months, and began in 2013 and ended the end of March 2014. And so what you see are 6 polyhedrons suspended from the ceiling, and
Aren't
you
these the platonic solids
uh,
also?
5 of them are, well, actually 4 of them are. Oh, you can, once again, can you see my cursor?
Yes.
Okay, well, the one on the far left, which I'm rotating my cursor around, that was supposed to be the tetrahedron. But
Okay.
I didn't like the simplicity of the tetrahedron, so I made that into a dodecahedron made
Hmm.
made of 12 isosceles triangles. So instead of having 4 faces, what I did is I trifaceted the 4 faces of a tetrahedron. So
Okay.
so it grew from being a regular tetrahedron, which is the first platonic solid, into a dodecahedron that, for all practical intents and purposes, may have not ever been introduced into the human equation, because I happen to be a person who explores the unexplored and brings
Hmm.
forth the unexplored for the purpose of um, providing new platforms to spring from in regards to further explorations of what we conveniently call the geometry of life or sacred geometry.
Okay.
So instead of being the tetrahedron, that's a dodecahedron made out of 12 isosceles triangles. And each one of those isosceles triangles are identical. They happen to be one of the two isosceles triangles that are related to the golden proportion, or which have the golden proportion in it. So in other words, that's 12 golden triangles. That's another way of talking about it, 12 golden triangles. And so the second one here, that's an octahedron. The third one here, it happens to be a hexahedron, also known as a cube. But on the interior, it's hard to tell from this view, on the interior are the three body diagonals that are drawn. So you see, when you look at it, you actually think you're looking at something that has six-fold symmetry. And it almost looks like a regular hexagon.
Right.
But it's actually a cube. And so here's one face of the cube: one corner, two corners, three corners, four corners. And then here's the face of the cube: one corner, two corners, three corners, four corners. Yeah, four corners, right. So anyway, the next one that I'm looking at right here, that happens to be a rhombic dodecahedron. And that it's too much to talk about that one. We'll just say that it's one of the most special regular geometries. And some people would say I'm abusing the word when I say regular, but each 12 faces are identical. Each one of those rhombic faces are identical to one another, and it's called a rhombic dodecahedron. And then behind it is the icosahedron, which is the regular icosahedron. That's 20 equilateral triangles. And then the one in the far back is a dodecahedron, a regular dodecahedron, which has 12 pentagonal faces. So in the background are 5 drawings. The largest drawing is related to the drawing that we were talking about earlier, the one titled A Light from Circle Island. These drawings in the background have no straight lines in them. They're all circles. So, so there you have it. So you have a representation of the divine masculine in all of these polyhedrons. And then on the back wall, you have representations of the divine feminine with all circles. So those who have some metaphysical bent, the circle represents the divine feminine for some of us, and the line represents the divine masculine. So here we go, speaking tribal wisdom, ancient tribal wisdom. Where do you draw the line? You can't know where to draw the line unless you have a special relationship between circles. And so that ideal relationship is 3 circles that are in relationship to one another. We're going to call those 3 circles, we're going to say that they represent 3 women. So the 3 wise women will be in relationship with one another to help guide the masculine energy, the males, in the right direction. So with ancient native cultures here on the continent that we're on, that I'm on, we have tribal wisdom where the elders, the men, the chieftains and what have you, they would go to the tribal elders, the women, and ask, must we go to war? So it wasn't something that was determined by the men. It was determined by the women. Now, women are not interested in war because a lot of horrible things happen. So for a group of women to say we sanction war would be the most extreme thing imaginable. And so we have displaced the divine feminine in the extreme. We adopted something called patriarchy, and all of the ills of the earth ensued, if I may. So let's go someplace else now, okay?
Yeah, I love that you're saying that. And while you're bringing up your next picture, I'll just talk a little bit to the indigenous wisdom that you brought up, because that can be found in the Abenaki, that can be found in the Ojibwe, and many of the native nations. And the chieftains that you're talking about were the clan mothers.
Yeah.
The clan mothers often picked the chief and selected who would be chief.
Thank you.
And when a war council came up, the chief would say, I want to go to war, but he would have to discuss it with the clan mothers. That's right. If the clan mothers sanctioned it, then he could go forward, but it always had to be sanctioned. And then that was the balance. That was the balance of powers. I love that you brought that up.
Thank you. Yes. And that's it. This is where we must return to some sanity on this planet, and to have had the head of the divine feminine cut off by the patriarchy once upon a time. We descended into hell. Okay. Now, heaven on earth might be may appear to be impossible to a great many, because so many people are accustomed to what we can conveniently, poetically, and metaphorically call hell on earth. But
Mhm.
we have to restore the divine feminine. We have to restore the sacred, the sacrality of the the the, the feminine persuasion, if I may.
Mhm.
Without that, we really are doomed. So, can this picture be seen here?
Yes, it can. It's beautiful. Please share.
This composition is titled Five Concentric Circles. If you look at this diagram, you see something that looks like a square grid in the background.
Mhm.
That square in the grid in the background could not have been established without a relationship between several circles. And what I'm getting at is that I had to figure out how to creatively calculate this. Let me see this: one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight. This 8 square grid. This is all established due to relationships between circles with circles. So I began with the circle and ended up with this 8 by 8 square grid. So these 5 concentric circles, beginning with the one in the center. The one in the center, we're going to say that the radius of that blue circle is the square root of 1. So you go from the center to this point. Well, if you go from the center of this blue circle to this point right here, where my cursor is, that distance happens to be the square root of 2. Now, this will not be true for anyone until they have the personal experience of drawing the square roots on something called Jacob's ladder. Jacob's ladder makes it possible for you to draw one circle after another, and each one of these
Right.
circles in relation to one another makes it possible for you to establish another point in the plane that makes it possible for you to draw a line, which will be the line after the square root of 2. Excuse me, the line after the square root of 1 would be the line called the square root of 2. The line after the
Right.
square root of 2 would be called the line called the square root of 3. This particular drawing, 5 concentric circles, gives us the square root of 1, the square root of 2, the square root of 4 is the yellow circle, and let's see, the square root of let's see, what is that? You know, uh, you know I apologize. Yeah, I can't tell either one of those right
Oh, you
now.
don't have to
But the
apologize.
orange,
It's fine.
but I can tell us what the radius of the red circle is. The radius of the red circle is the square root of 16.
Half of the
Okay.
other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah. Anyway, this is simply a, a playful artistic primer for anyone who wants to look at the question: what do you mean by square roots in the plane?
Mhm.
So 5 concentric circles, it has an alternate title which goes like this: what Euclid really wanted us to know. And so ever since I became a student of sacred geometry, a student of Euclidean geometry, a student of mathematics by way of this geometry, I've been uh, slowly developing some vocabulary that can be articulated that will make sense to a person who slows down to the speed of having a personal experience. Um, there's a metaphor which I can't speak now, but it's sort of like, how do I say this? If you talk to a person about what it feels like riding on the back of a horse or an elephant, you can only use words. They cannot have that experience by hearing those words. So this geometry that I'm alluding to here, it really won't have meaning for anyone until they choose to have an up close and personal experience. Compass,
Mhm.
straight edge, paper, pencils, or ink pens or markers. When you do the drawings, that's when the body can say to the mind, this is real.
Yes.
And that's real learning. And so all of this brutal abuse of power by way of all of these so-called educators across a great span of time, uh, standing in front of people lecturing about science, mathematics, or whatever, to not have a personal experience is what I consider to be a tragedy and a travesty. And for so-called education to be happening without giving people a personal experience is abuse of power. Yeah.
Yes. And I want to drive this home because I remember when as a mathematics major myself, and I remember I was playing with sacred geometry and I was telling one of my elders that I love geometry. And she goes, well, if you really, well, she said, well, where's your geometry? And I'm saying, excuse me. And she's like, well, if you really love geometry, why aren't you doing it? Why aren't you playing with it, having that experience and relationship with it?
Yes.
We love to talk about things in theory. As a human race, we love to talk about the theory of this and the theory of that. And the bottom line is that we need to have the experience. We need to make the mistakes. We need to understand the relationship and the relationship between us and the tools that we're using, the tools and the relationship of the end result of that it's providing. Is it providing the end result that we're looking for? And to switch our tools and to have that right relationship with the pattern. And then what else is flowing from it now that you've engaged? And we don't take the time to have these experiences. So I just want to emphasize what you're talking about in terms of that right relationships. And I remember when I first met you and you're like, oh, well, I really engage with the flower of life. And I'm like, here's mine, yes, I get it. I understand the depths of what it takes to really sit down, take your time and master hitting each radius point, and having that interlocking and allowing it to just expand as you expand. And there's a relationship between you, the artist, and the artwork.
Yes, right. That's right. That's one of those things where you are, one is actually preparing the pedestrian awareness, the intellect, to embrace something cosmic. Yes. Something that is something that can be labeled transtemporal awareness and translocal awareness. And that's perhaps a little abusive to throw those words out at the audience, but have some experience, audience. You'll understand what I'm talking about when I say transtemporal and translocal awareness. These patterns are indicators. They are visual references to the possibility of doing quantum jumping, if I may. If nothing else, embracing the notion that I am another yourself by way of the relationship between one circle and its neighbor. Beautiful example of equal. So with Terence asking us to de-emphasize the notion of straight lines.
Yes.
The image that I referenced earlier, that I drew in 1994 when I was at Penland School of Crafts, that image, minus the few circles, are reference to vibrational signatures that emanate from any so-called center. And I say so-called center because it turns out that all centers are one. This is like metaphysics 12:012 or something. And it's really unfair for me to reference this, but I can't seem to help it.
I think it's unfair. I don't think it's unfair because what we're basically saying is that there's no such thing as an empty space. When you have a space, there's a center point. When you have an infinite amount of spaces, then there's an infinite amount of center points. But there's no emptiness. There's a center point. And so what you're just alluding to is that.
Yes. Yeah. The challenge that we have is we know that how you say it, the knowing is in the experience. So we're talking about something that we have experienced, and much of the audience will say, well, they're talking over my head. And but please do not be experience a sense of despair. We're not really talking over your head. What we're doing is we're telling you there's something around the bend waiting for you. There's some deep knowing that's looking for you, and you're going to find it in something that we are alluding to called experience. When you have this personal experience, that's when you say aha. That's when you have this beautiful aha moment. You know, I understand, I overstand. That's it. Yeah, not a moment sooner. You know, there's a beautiful story called The Tiger's Fang. I don't know if you've ever heard of it before, but
No, I haven't.
yeah, well, Paul Twitchell was a student of Rebbe Zartar's, and Rebbe Zartar's was once a Tibetan lama, and it is said that uh, if he didn't immortalize his body, it is said that he was somewhere in the neighborhood of 500 years uh, of age when Paul Twitchell met him. So anyway, Rebbe Zartar's took Paul Twitchell on some cosmic journeys into the higher planes of reality.
Okay.
And what happened is Paul Twitchell comes back and writes this book titled The Tiger's Fang, which is a way of saying that I brought the tiger's fang back to prove to you that I was in the presence of a tiger. Okay. So anyway, yeah, I just love that notion. In other words, you know, we you know, you and I have put our hands in the mouth of the tiger and pulled the tiger's fang. Many people can only say, I might have enough courage to do that. Well, those that do, what you'll bring back is something that is richer than words can actually convey. Yes, which is what we're attempting to allude to in words. Uh, it sums up as cosmic revelations. Yes. This diagram that you see in front of you is page 12. When Robert Powell Sr. was teaching, he was teaching something called the 12 pages, which was a way of introducing his students to what we conveniently call sacred geometry. So my page 12, this particular one created in 1994, is a jazzed up page 12. I added a whole lot of lines. All of those dash lines I added, they were not part of the original page 12. The original page 12 had the green lines. So if you can see the green lines, the original page 12 had the green lines, and those green lines have names to them. So from, let's see now, from the C point to the D point, which goes through the center, you have an O point there. From the C point to the D point, that is actually the square root of 3. And the diagonal of that blue square above and that blue square below, which means that if you go from a point, the lower K point in the lower left-hand corner of that blue, where the blue horizontal line intersects with the blue vertical line. Oh, right. That's the K point right there. If you go across that diagonal, go through the O point and go up to this point, which I think is I, that line is the square root of 5. So half of this line, half of the line, the square root of line from the O point to the J point, or the O point to the K point, that length actually is half root of the square root of 5. So if you add the half of square root of 5 plus half of the square root of 1, you have a length that is called phi, or phi. And I didn't pull the drawing up, but there's another drawing up in the 12 pages. It's page 10, which shows the pentagonal form and the hexagonal form in relation to one another, dynamic relationship to one another. But I didn't pull that one up, so we can add that, you know, after the fact, so to speak, if you wish. So, gosh, so where do we go from here?
So we keep going. Just show a little bit more of your art. I love this because people need to understand how the beauty of the sacred geometry comes together. And maybe, please show us this beautiful artwork and where your heart was with this.
This one is titled Window to the Golden Temple number 2. So for those of you who know a little bit of art history within the African diaspora, we have a beautiful soul named John Thomas Biggers. And when I met John Thomas Biggers, I was creating works of art that were quite different from what you're looking at. If you look at this drawing, and if you look at this vesica right here, that vesica right there that I'm highlighting with the cursor. Okay, I need to take that off. I don't know how to do that. Okay, I don't know. I just drew a line and it wasn't intentional. Let's see, okay. Anyway, now there's a dot in the picture that does. Okay, now it disappeared. Okay, so if we go from the bottom here, and go up, tracing this. There are two vesicles. One is a
Yeah.
deep blue, and one is a turquoise blue. Both of those vesicles are the same pattern, and they end up being something that's called a vesica Pisces. Well, when John Thomas Biggers met me, I was creating vesica Pisces that were on the horizontal axis. And so over here in the far left, where that cursor is, okay, and if you trace it around, you go all the way on the outside of this pattern over to there, and then back around to here. I was creating those type of vesicas that would have a circle in the center, and that represented the all-seeing eye of God for me personally. Now, if you go to the very center of this cluster and you see that little vesica in there,
yes,
that's not a vesica Pisces, but that is a pattern that's used in Egyptian so-called hieroglyphics, or Egyptian writing, and for me, that represents the power of manifestation or the word. Okay, so
okay.
That combination of vesica here in the center, this vertical vesica here, which for John Biggers, he wanted that to represent the yoni, okay? And that was his special request. So I created my very first composition with that vesica Pisces on a vertical axis being emphasized for him, and we bartered. He gave me a number of prints of his in exchange for this original work of art, which who knows where it is now. But it was the very first piece that I created. I went and did a whole series based on his request to create a work of art that had a vertical vesica Pisces versus a horizontal vesica Pisces. And so mine were always horizontal. So here is a marriage of the horizontal vesica Pisces and the vertical vesica Pisces. And if you take note, look at these 9 white diamond shapes inside. You see that?
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
Well, the number 9, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's related to a lot of theses. We have the Rodin mathematics. I can't remember his first name now, but and you have Nikola Tesla with 369, and of course we have Terence echoing that. Terence has a beautiful relationship with Walter Russell's teachings, and for those that don't know, Walter Russell was told by Nikola Tesla that you're so far ahead of humankind, you might as well pack this stuff up and put it on ice for 100 years or a century, and maybe in 100 years or a century, humans will have come around and be ready to ingest, digest, and assimilate what you are placing before them. So,
and that could be said about Walter Russell himself too. If he ever read The Secret Teachings of Life or The Universal One, he was way ahead of his time. So he got it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they were contemporaries, and I have no idea how much dialoguing they did. But I feel like Terrence Howard is another Walter Russell, and I'm another Nikola Tesla. So so I'm not anxious about it, but I'm curious to know if he and I are actually going to connect in this incarnation. And
we're going to put it out there. Terrence Howard or friends of Terrence Howard, if you know him, he needs to connect with Vandorn Hinnant and myself, because I would love to have that conversation with him too also. It's beautiful.
One day we might have Terrence and Vandorn conversing on your show. Okay, The Infinite Way.
That would be wonderful.
Let's do that. That's what we will do. Yes. So what I want to say about these works of art is that these works of art end up being keys that open up doors in the psyche of human beings that see them. So I have a few friends that I tell them I'm like the Asian man running around with the keys in the Matrix, opening up doors. Oh, you want to get from this place to that place? Oh, here's a door. Go through this door. So I've been doing this now for a number of decades, having the experience and knowing beyond a shadow of a doubt that these are actually keys that open up doors in the psyche of humans. So,
and I want to take you. I want to digress just a little bit there, because this is really important what you're saying. And where I want to go to is the fact that our country, at least the United States country, the European country, many of the buildings are built in relationship to sacred geometry. Why are they built in relationship to sacred geometry? What is important about the land on Mother Earth in that particular space? What is important in terms of the way that the building is built in sacred geometry, ensuring that the specifications are in not only in relationship within the building, but in relationship to the other buildings a distance from it, and in relationship to how it's laid out on the earth. And people don't realize this. And what you said is so important in the
Well,
respect that it opens up portals.
yes.
It opens up doors. It is the key.
So now we're talking something that's called torsion physics. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens is in the human body, in everything that grows in nature, the divine proportion or the golden ratio is inherent. It's inherent because life force has to flow a particular way. And so the way it flows is in relation to these proportions that are that we are an embodiment of. I don't know how else to say it. So with the architecture, you create architecture with the golden proportion in it because there's such a thing called torsion physics where the energy flows in such a way that it is life affirming as opposed to the opposite of life affirming. Okay, that's the only way I know how to talk about it in the most simplistic terms. And so what we have is it's either elevating or degrading. We either have energy that's elevating or energy that is degrading. So the reason that the golden proportion is embodied in these edifices is because we want energy that is elevating versus energy that is degrading. So in other words, harmonic resonances versus dissonance.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's very, very simple. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I want to bring in like work like Dan Winters does. He calls it plank fire, right? Where the implosion creates this harmonic resonance that bridges us to that consciousness that we're looking for within, you know? And it doesn't matter what it is because all things hold energy.
Yes, and all things are conductors of energy. We live in a field. We live in a field that we call it the plasma field, right?
Right.
And everything is all of consciousness is the plasma field. The plasma field is consciousness. Consciousness is the plasma field. Now,
right.
That's some metaphysical lingo that's going to be. I'm talking over a whole lot of people's heads, but there are a few of us that know what I'm talking about. So if you say that I am swimming in an ocean, and the ocean is all space-time.
Mm-hmm.
One of the names that we give that ocean of space-time is the plasma field. So
right.
there's water throughout the universe. You know, we have a lot of fiction that's being perpetrated called science. Water is everywhere. We have all kinds of molecules, atoms that exist where they're necessary and why they're necessary. Now, I don't want to try to break that down, but all atoms exist where they're necessary and why they're necessary.
Why they're necessary, yes.
So I'm going to talk about water for a moment, okay? We have a group of youth that call themselves the artist, AUTIST, and put an S on for plural. The artists are what we conveniently call non-verbal humans, non-speaking humans. They communicate with one another in a place that they call the hill. And this is a non-physical place. It's a higher dimensional frequency where they travel in their light bodies and commune with each other. So they have dialogues, what have you there, and then they come back here and they're back in their physical bodies in the limitations that they're experiencing
within their physical beings.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now they have been communicating with a woman named Veda Austin, and they have told her that there are 7 states of water, and one of those states of water is thought. Okay, so so many years ago, I've lost how many years ago it was, but I was guided to manifest what I'll call a very interesting and curious prayer in relation to the water, which is a synthesis of what Dr. Hugh Lam was teaching as a Hawaiian shaman, and what Dr. Emoto gave us with messages in water.
Water, yes.
So if we either think to water, or we say to water, or the cells in our bodies, or the cells in the multiverse called other individuals, etc., if we think these thoughts, I apologize, please forgive me, I love you, I appreciate you, I respect you, I thank you. Now, I call that a Vandorn's prayer. Today we're gonna call that Vandorn's prayer, okay? And for those that want to be humored a little bit, how about us calling it the prayer of Anku Shabda Omnibi? And I'll say that once. Okay. Yes. So, so you know, we are all capable of serving humankind in ways that we might not have been able to imagine. Can you see this image?
Yes.
This is a drawing that is getting ready to be donated to the Black Mountain College Museum and Art Center. It's a drawing that was done by Robert Lee Powell Sr. on Sunday, February the 20th, 1983. It's called The Egg and Bucky's Wheat Germ. So the Black Mountain College Museum and Art Center is attempting to preserve the memory of Black Mountain College and the memory of many of those who were participants. And there were many and varied participants. Just to name some names that are in the public domain: John Cage, Mercy Cunningham, Buckminster Fuller, and many others. I apologize for not actually knowing the names. But anyway, this composition is going to be donated to their collection only because it references Bucky's wheat germ in it. And it's a very fragile drawing. If you look over on the right-hand side, there's a tear there. There are tears around the perimeter. This is not a very strong piece of paper, but I'm trusting that they will take the initiative to have it preserved properly. And I'm actually going to donate one of my works of art to the collection also, so that one work by Vandorn and one work by Robert Lee Powell Sr. will be in their collection. Let's see now. There are other drawings. My stars. I've shown that one. Okay, this drawing right here. Okay, I don't know if I actually did I ever show this one?
No, you didn't show that one. No.
Okay, well, Bob Powell Sr. was busy answering the question, what's the distance from this point to that point? So in this particular drawing, we have some red lines. I'm drawing a line from with my cursor from the end of one red line, which terminates at this point and goes all of the way over here, terminates at that point. Well, it turns out that half of that red line, the length is the square root of 2. Mm-hmm. And the square root of 2, for those that don't know, is the body diagonal of a square. Okay, so if you draw a point from the opposite, draw a line from the opposite point in a square, you'll get the square root of 2. And that's something that's understood. But what we are doing is we're introducing opportunities for people to see this dynamic relationship called the square root of 2. So all of the red lines, all of the purple lines, and all of the blue lines, all of these lines are square root of 2 lines. Mm-hmm. And so up here in the top, you have a cluster of concentric blue circles. And mm-hmm. all of those blue circles are related to fractal fragments of the square root of 2. Now, mm-hmm. that's not going to make sense to anybody but me, because I know that that's true. However, one day, I may slow down to the speed of creating a manual for people to be able to actually see everything that can be said about these drawings. That's a lot of work. I haven't committed to it. I'm too young to commit to it. And that's a shout out to my friend Marnie, who keeps saying, Vandorn, the book, where's the book? And my answer is I'm too young to produce the book, but we can say it's forthcoming. Anyway, this drawing, minus a lot of these red, blue, and purple lines, this is a drawing that's in the book titled The Rest of Euclid. And what
Okay.
each one of those red dots that you see happens to be, let me look at this thing. Yeah, each one of those red dots represents the distance between 1/3 of the square root of 3. So if you can see my cursor, can you see my cursor right there?
Yes, I can.
That vesicle, that's a vesicle Pisces. Well, that
Hmm.
vesicle Pisces, the length from that point to that point equals the square root of 3. So if you go from this point to that point, that's 1/3 of the square root of 3. And from this point to that point, that's another 1/3 of the square root of 3. And then from this point to that point, that's another 1/3 of the square root of 3. So if you go from this point to that point, that's 2/3 the square root of 3. So what we're talking about is establishing a system where you divide lengths, you divide line segments with other lines, and each one of those divisions will give you the name of another number. So, like right here, down in the lower left-hand corner, I'm showing
Hmm.
I'm showing a vesica Pisces, and that
Right.
the length is from here to there is the square root of 3. Well,
Right.
it turns out what happens is from here to here, from that point to that point, happens to be the square root of 1. So the square root of 1 is perpendicular to the square root of 3.
Hmm.
And the square root of 1 bisects the square root of 3, and the square root of 3 bisects the square root of 1. So you have division in the plane. And I apologize for not having this absolutely exquisite composition that a friend of mine has titled The Fractal Brain. And we're going to include this image, okay? This is,
Okay.
I'm calling it the fractal brain, and it's actually a close up, a center view of of a larger drawing. But what the fractal brain does is, or this particular composition, it shows you by color coding this fractal division of these patterns, these star-like patterns. The whole composition grows out of a technique that is called, um, well, let's say, I don't know how to talk about this. The KOCH. There's a man, a mathematician whose last name is KOCH, and it's called the Koch crystal, or the Koch
Okay.
crystal. Yes. And what it is you take an equilateral triangle and you divide each edge of that equilateral triangle into 3 equal parts. And then if you take and you swing 2 of the lines down to create an equilateral triangle made out of 1/3 of that edge, and you do that on each side, that will give you a 6-pointed star.
Okay.
And so what I did is I took 3 circles, the A circle, the B circle, and the C circle, drew them on a picture plane in black. And then I added uh, line segments between points, between intersections of circles with circles. And those line segments ended up bisecting other lines that I drew. The square root of 1 was bisected by the square root of 3. And then I continued to bisect the smaller divisions until I came up with these very, very tiny divisions. So when people look at it, they think that they're looking at a composition that's developed with lines. No, the composition could only exist because of the relationship between those 3 circles. And
Right.
so this is what is missing in uh, number theory. What is missing
Okay.
is a comprehension of the relationship between lines by way of a relationship between circles.
Hmm.
It gets no more complex, no more simple than that. So all of the lines that you're looking at on this plane can only exist. The beauty of those lines, that honeycomb pattern that you see, the beauty can only be established by way of the relationship between the circles. And so when we start talking uh, true physics, and we start talking about how each so-called atom, which is it's very hard to talk about this because we haven't had this mapped out for us in rational linear language. Okay, we as a species have not had these deep insights that I'm attempting to figure out how to articulate in a few words. Every one of these circles could be said to represent a sphere. Well, every sphere has a center. What if we said that that sphere is actually related to a toroidal field? Then we get
Hmm.
closer to the truth, if I may, of talking about
Right.
what is an atom. Okay, an atom, a photon. Like a photon is a toroidal field. We have different people, Nassim Harriman, and a number of other people are actually articulating what I'm referencing now. They've been talking about it for some time. And so what we do is we have these nodes of consciousness that are interarticulating, which actually are the cause of what we consider matter. Okay? It's an interarticulation of intent or consciousness that is outpicturing itself in what we call physicality as matter. And really, this is only a poetic reference to something that is really too cosmic to pin down or anchor down with words and descriptors. So pictures pay justice. And we have people like Dan Winter giving us these beautiful pictographs for the longest time. And now we have Nisam, how do you pronounce his name again? Harriman?
Harriman?
Yeah, right. Well, how do you pronounce his first name?
I can't.
Okay. well, those who know his name, we have Harriman who's talking about this, and lots of people who are talking about this. This is the new physics that is begging to be let out of the cage. So
yeah, and it's beautiful. It's beautiful work because consciousness is now being understood and being represented by the mathematics and the physics.
Yes.
But consciousness came first, as
Yes.
Dan Winters would say.
Yes.
We keep trying to put numbers to define consciousness. No, consciousness was there, and here we are expressing it, and representing it through the numbers and the physics.
Thank you, and that's exactly it. We are representing it, as in representing it in a context that is intellectual,
Yes.
and so so it's a beautiful dance. And so we have so many people that are serving the same purpose. I call it the Great Awakening. That's my name for what we're experiencing is the Great Awakening. And it's been in my frame of reference now for decades, because this is what I came for. This is the party that I came for, the Great Awakening. So all I can say is let's get it on, Yeah. And with the picture being worth 1,000 words, I can only say I'm so grateful for the opportunity to present a few of these images. Here's one right here. This is an image of the original drawing that I alluded to earlier. Oh, here's one that I wanted to show you. Before We Knew. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay. Now, Before We Knew is I'm going to call it a cosmic pictogram today. That circle on the outside actually wants to be symbolic and representative of the all that is, or the womb of creation, WOMB of creation. So inside of the womb of creation, you have what? You have duality. So we have duality expressed with this red and blue, and we have duality up here expressed in the red and two. So basically, you have these two twins in the womb of creation that can be said to represent the masculine and the feminine. So the masculine has the feminine embodied in it, and the feminine has the masculine embodied in it. And then you have this beautiful illumination right here that is illuminating this vesica Pisces. So you have this vesica Pisces that exists inside of the womb of creation. And then you have a smaller vesica Pisces here in purple, that vesica Pisces, and then another vesica Pisces right there. And then at the bottom, that same vesica Pisces. So now we have this caduceus kind of dynamic right here. So you have this line that actually represents a spiraling line, this purple line. And then those that know a little bit about color theory, we can have some play here talking about the marriage of red and blue, which gives us the color purple. So now another thing that I've done through the years is I've color coded my diagrams. So on the horizontal axis, I have the color red. And on the vertical axis, I have the color blue. So the original yin yang symbol was in red and blue. The blue represented the divine feminine, and the red represented the divine masculine. The
Mm.
red representing the electrical element and blue representing the magnetic element. So here I have it with the vertical axis being blue and the horizontal axis being red. So I'm going to say something like primary and secondary, okay? And I'm going to leave it alone. I'm just going to say primary and secondary. I've already alluded to that with the notion of you don't know where to draw the lines until you draw the circles. So which came first, the chicken or the egg? Uh, watch this. Adam's rib. What are you talking about? Adam's rib. No offense implied or intended, good people, but there's been some hocus pocus in the dance, y'all. And I'm trying to remove some of the hocus pocus from the equation and suggest to us that inside of the womb of creation is the all. That's where life emerges from. That's where life exists. So when we restore the divine feminine to the conversation, we walk away from myriad expressions of gross insanity into something that I consider to be worthy of having waited for. Okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, we talk about string theory, and in this particular work of art, before we knew, the subtitle being From the Mother of Everything, if you look at the bottom, where the very bottom of the circle, the large circle, and the very top of the large circle, there are a bunch of lines that are emanating from those 2 points, and they're touching that red horizontal line.
Yes.
All of those lines I claim to be related to what, what is his name? The physicist Gates, Sylvester Gates is talking about in his conversations with string theory, and so many people talking about string theory. We're talking about the phenomenon of vibration and frequencies, and these are simply pictographs that want to speak to that. I mean, most of us have an idea in our mind of what a harp is, and so when you pluck the string on a harp, you're creating a sound, and that sound has great meaning, and each one of those sounds have great meaning. This particular composition can be said to be a pictograph of a harp. I actually built an aeolian harp one time, many years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, and looking forward to revisiting that. I don't know if I'll make it around to that, but I'm interested. Yes. Oh, please let me bring this to everyone's attention.
Yes, please do.
This is the first book that I'm responsible for, Paths to the Infinite, Finding Your Sacred Center. It is actually a transcript of an interview that took place between myself and a fellow who lives in Durham. His name is Mark Lee. And Mark has a program in cyberspace, and he interviewed me several years ago, and one of Anna Maria's closest friends said, you could turn that into a book. So we did. We turned it into a book, and now it's available. I want to suggest to everyone that this is an excellent tool to use in classroom environments where people are learning something about art. There are, I don't know how many images are in the book, but every image that we talked about in the interview is in the book. So it's my, I'll say that this is my contribution to art education, if I may, and maybe by extension, more than art education. We see it down at the bottom. It says consciousness, spirituality, and arts. Those are just markers that are attempting to suggest that there's something that can be spoken to about consciousness, about spirituality, and about the arts. So anyway, I wanted to bring that to everyone's attention. And some of you heard me say Jacob's Ladder. Here's a sketch, what I call a beginning of Jacob's Ladder. And what you have are all of these red circles, which are centered at this point right here. And all of the black circles are centered at this point right here. So that would be the A point and the B point. So here's some little numbers. You can't see them because it's impossible. Let me see. I don't know if I can enlarge this. Yeah, I don't know if I can. So let me see if I can zoom in. Oh yeah, I can zoom in. How about that? I did zoom in. I did zoom in, right? Okay, so you see right here, from that right there where my cursor is, that says the square root of 1. So from here to here, that's the square root of 1. From here to there, that's the square root of 2. So here's a square right here. And that square, the body diagonal of that square is the square root of 2. So from here, oh well, I better leave this alone, because for some reason, oh my, I actually believe that I put the wrong numbers. I put this, right here I'm supposed to have put the number square root of 2, and I put the square root of 1. So right here is supposed to be no. Sometimes oh yes, here we go. No, if I go from this point to that point, that's the square root of 2. So I have the numbers right. Right there is the square root of 2. And if I go from this point to that point, that's the square root of 3. So if I go around the circle,
there it is. Yeah, there it is.
And so the square root of 4. Yeah. So if I go from this point to this point, I have.
And then you bring the circle down. Yeah.
That's the square root of 4. So from here to there is the square root of 4. So we're saying that the numbers originate from here. This will be the 0 point. And from here to here is the square root of 1. From here to here is the square root of 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, ad infinitum. So I won't say any more about this drawing, except to say it's an interesting sketch that is the beginnings of what's conveniently called Jacob's ladder. And I think I went up to the square root of 25 with this one. And it doesn't matter. Yes, you can just keep going. But there's some interesting dynamics that exist in that composition. So I say we've covered a lot of territory. What do you say?
We've covered a lot of territory, and I'm so grateful. If you want to stop the share, we can go just back to the two of us.
Okay.
But thank you so much for sharing your work of art and the comprehension and understanding of sacred geometry, to experience it and what it means to experience it and how to approach some of that experience. Thank you for sharing a little bit more about the rest of Euclid. And I suggest, if you haven't gotten that book, that you take a look and you grab the book. The rest, it's called Rest of Euclid, and you can give the extended name if you want.
An ancient architecture of mathematics and a modern theory of number, or the modern theory of number.
And we'll have that information down in the box. Yeah.
Yes. The major title, The Rest of Euclid, you can find it that way, because there's only one book out there titled The Rest of Euclid. And you can find it, once again, Barnes & Noble and Amazon. I would encourage you to buy from Barnes & Noble, since Barnes & Noble is, doesn't sell nearly as many books as Amazon. I would like for you to have the experience and support Barnes and Nobles. That's a special request to anybody that wants to buy the book. Please buy it from Barnes and Noble, so that they can actually they'll never be able to compete with Amazon, but at least we can give them some business today.
Yeah. Yes. And let our audience know, if they want to reach out to you, how they can reach you and your contact information.
All right. vandornhinnant@gmail.com. That's the easiest way to reach me. My name at gmail.com. Just reach out and say hello. I'll be glad to respond, and we'll take it from there. Yes.
Okay, and your website? Because I know you have.
Well, the visual arts website, the two-dimensional work, is at Light Weavings. That's LIGHTWEAVINGS.com, and the three-dimensional work is posted at vandornhinnant.com. So two websites, one for two-dimensional work and one for three-dimensional work. Yes.
And then you just had a showing. Okay, so in your showing, you just had a book released. Please tell us about your new book that was just released.
Well, what happens is an opportunity to exhibit a large body of work came to me a few months ago. Maybe it was last year, and I said yes. And so the exhibition began in the middle of March, very close to my birthday, the 15th of March, and it ends at the end of June, June the 28th. So we have like two months and some change to go. May, June. Okay, so we have 2 more months. The exhibition is in Gadsden, Alabama, at the Mary G. Hardin Center for Cultural Arts. And
Mm.
as a result of having this exhibition, I decided to publish a catalog. So I reached out to Dr. Enolia Foti, who said, yes, I would love to write something. So what you did is you wrote this endorsement for the back, and then we turned around and said, well, what about a foreword? So you wrote this absolutely beautiful foreword. So now this catalog, which is, I think, 50 pages total, including the front cover and the back cover, they are available. You'd have to get them from me because they're not published by anyone. I'm self-publishing right now. The Gadsden Center has 10 of these catalogs and for sale in their store. But you can either go to Gadsden and get them from the Gadsden Mary G. Hardin Center for Cultural Arts, or you can order them from me. And it's 50 pages loaded with a beautiful story about my journey as a visual artist. The exhibition is titled Dreaming with Open Eyes. No, 45 Years of Dreaming with Open Eyes. And that covers it. I will say, as many others say, artists tend to dream with open eyes. So we could speak poetically and metaphorically now and talk about the third eye, which wants to be open in this process that we call creativity. And so we'll say that an artist might be dreaming with three eyes open, the spiritual eye, the third eye, and the physical eyes. And that's where it gets to be delicious. That's when we really get to deliver some true cosmic beauty that cannot do anything other than elevate others. So I've had numerous occasions where people have said, your artwork is doing this for me or to me or with me. And I'm saying, yes, just as intended. Thank you for choosing to have the experience. Yes. So, I mean, I've had numerous occasions where I've been moved by people's reportage as to what the artwork does for them and with them and what have you. So every time this happens, I say that this is my reward. My reward is in receiving these stories, these confirmations that I'm doing exactly what I signed up to do, which is to bring something that is elevating to the human equation, that is also liberating in the human equation. So thank you.
So hopefully you'll have that beautiful, beautiful book on either Barnes and Nobles and Amazon eventually, so that our audience can get a hold to it, because the artwork within it is absolutely stunning. And to have one of those, especially with what it brings forward to consciousness, and opening up those doors and those portals and those vortexes that you do, that key for the key master, from the key master, it would be absolutely wonderful to be able to gain and to gain access to it. So
well, thank you. I appreciate that. Your words of encouragement will have me turning my attention to the prospect of having it published formally and made available through Amazon and Barnes and Noble, which I had not considered because it's a lot of work to publish a book, as you know. But
yes, I do.
I will take this into consideration, okay?
Yes.
One more assignment now. If I could just find somebody to do that for me so I can go back to making sculptures. Hello.
I know what you mean, because the administrivia is a pain.
Oh,
I know.
yes,
I know.
yes.
But before we let you go, is there one last thing you would like to say to our audience to leave them with?
Yes. There's a brother named Ingle Jones who has something called 12-minute conversations. He interviewed me last year, and I waited for months and months and months waiting to hear back from him that it's gone live. So it finally went live about a week or so ago, and I was so delighted for it to go live because at the end I said, "You are the power." So my message to everyone that's listening is that there is not a power greater than the power that resides in you. And for you to get still and quiet, access that power, live from that place of power, stand in your spiritual sovereignty, you get rewarded in ways that you could not possibly imagine. So, once again, you are the power. That's the message that I would like to leave you with. And thank you. Yes.
Thank you so, so much for being with us. This is Vandorn Hinnant, and we are so grateful. I am so grateful for you spending the time and taking the time to appear on The Infinite Way. And you know what? People have learned tremendously. And knowing that they've learned tremendously, I'm going to ask you to subscribe. I'm going to ask you to share the love and share the love with someone who can benefit and learn from this conversation, and subscribe. So thank you again, Vandorn Hinnant.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Enolia. All right.
And this has been another episode of The Infinite Way, where spirituality meets humanity. We'll see you next time. Take care.
Thank you.